May I ask you a question? Sure. I'll be glad to answer it if I am able. What do you think about the pastor's message this morning? Well, to tell you the truth, I wasn't impressed. Tithe challenge? Is he joking? Well, the Bible does say to trust God in the tithe. The pastor had the verse up on the overhead for all of us to see. Yes, you did. However, the 90-day tithe challenge is a gimmick. It is not something that God endorses. How can you say that? The Bible clearly says to prove God with the tithe. Jessica, you have a lot to learn. Do you have time for a Bible study at my apartment? Sure. I always love a Bible study. I am assuming that since I brought up the topic of tithing, that tithing is what the study will be about? Yes. Let's head over to the apartment, shall we? Is the chair comfortable enough for you? Yes. Thank you. Good. Now, before we begin, I want to tell you why I said the tithing challenge was a gimmick. Do you remember what the pastor said about the challenge? Yes, ma'am. He said if we would tithe for 90 days and God didn't bless us, he would return 100% of our tithe money to us. Correct. And there, my dear friend, is the gimmick. I don't understand. Well, doesn't God bless you every day of your life? With friends? A place to live? A place to sleep? Food for your stomach? The air you breathe? Yes, he does. But, can't you see? There's the gimmick. You go back to the pastor 3 months from now telling him you want your money back, that God has not been blessing you as expected, and the pastor is going to remind you of good health, a home, a job, family, and many other things that God has blessed you with. I thought God said he would open the windows of heaven and pour out such a blessing that we would not be able to receive it. Is that not speaking of material things besides what we already have? The blessing promised in Malachi is not for us, child. That is why we need to do this study. Let's look at Malachi 3 verse 10. Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, and prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing that you cannot receive. Do you know what that phrase, windows of heaven, is referring to? Isn't it speaking of God looking down on us from heaven? Opening them, he will shower us with blessings. Child, the windows of heaven is speaking of clouds in the sky. The blessing promised for tithing is not wealth, health, and material possessions that seem unending. The blessing promised is rain. Rain? Yes, rain. Look at Genesis 7 and verses 11 and 12. Notice what happened there. The windows of heaven opened and rain fell upon the earth. Now, notice verse 2 of the next chapter. The windows of heaven closed and the rain stopped. Yes. Now let's go back to the Malachi text. Keeping in mind that the windows of heaven is clouds and the blessing is rain, notice the rest of the chapter. The vine will not cast her fruit before the time of harvest. It is rain. But, what is the devourer mentioned here? The devourer is not the bad health, mechanical problems, and loss of job that our pastor said it was. No, it is locusts that were eating their vegetation. God said if the tithes were brought to the storehouse, he would keep the locust off of the garden and the orchard so that there would be a great harvest. But doesn't this verse apply to the church? Isn't the church the storehouse? No, Jessica. The storehouse was in the temple in Jerusalem. God said the tithe was to go there. The New Testament church was not even in existence at the time Malachi spoke these words, but the minister of the temple are equivalent to today's ministers in the church, aren't they? There are similarities, I suppose. However, the church was never meant to take tithe of you or anyone else. Now, I have to admit, I am not sure you are right there, Miss Melba. Jessica, turn to Psalm 147 and verses 19 and 20. What do you see there? Well, according to this, God gave his statutes and ordinances to Israel. He gave them to no other nation, correct? Now, read Leviticus 27 and verses 30 through 34. Pay close attention to the last verse. All the tithe, seed of the land, the fruit of the tree, holy unto the Lord. Every 10th animal to pass under the rod shall not be exchanged. These are the commands God handed down to Moses for the children of Israel on Mount Sinai. Notice what it says. The tithe command was given to Moses for the children of Israel. And the psalm said God gave his ordinances and statutes to no other nation. Oh? Why does the pastor not point this out to us? There could be several reasons, Jessica. I really cannot pinpoint which one it could be, but notice in that last passage I had you look at, what did the tithe consist of? Seed of the land, fruit of the tree, and every 10th animal to pass under the rod. It appears they were crops and livestock, but the pastor explained it to us. Remember? He said that they did not have money back then. Jessica, are you still in Leviticus 27? Yes, I am. What do you want me to look at? Look at verse 15 and also verse 18. What do you see? Money is mentioned in both verses. That's right. Now, look at verse 31. If a man will redeem out of his tithes, he shall add a fifth part thereto. Yes, a man could buy back his tithes if he wished to do so, but only the crop tithe. Verse 33 tells us the animal tithe could not be bought back. But the important thing to see is that they had money and they could use money to buy back the tithe. The tithes commanded for the storehouse were agricultural, not money. There is not one verse in the entire Bible that tells one to tithe money to the tabernacle, to the temple, to the synagogue, or to the church. So for the pastor to say they had no money is wrong. Yes, and depending on his amount of study he has put into the Bible, it could be deceitful. He should know they had money. The Israelites carried much silver and gold out of Egypt. That's right. Of course, they used the gold to make their idol, the golden calf. Well, child, that is another lesson for another day. We are looking at the tithe today. There's a couple more passages that I want you to look at, if you will. Okay, what are they? They are both in Deuteronomy. The first is in chapter 6, verses 1 through 3. The other is in chapter 12, verses 10 and 11. It says here that the tithes were not to be given until the children of Israel crossed the Jordan River. Yes, God does not want tithes from Gentile soil. The tithes were to come from the land that he had promised to Jacob, the land of Canaan. But doesn't the New Testament tell us to tithe? There are only a few passages in the New Testament where tithing is mentioned. All of them point back to the law or before the law. We have been brought into a new covenant. There is no command to tithe whatsoever in the new covenant. Miss Melba, thank you so much for this Bible study. It has opened my eyes to a few things that I have never seen and have never been taught. But I do have one other question before I go. What is it, child? Does this mean I am not supposed to give anything? Oh no, dear. You should give. But according to the Word of God, 2 Corinthians 9 verse 7, your giving should be what you choose to give, not as someone else dictates. Keep your eyes open for people in need. If you are able to help them, do so. God will be truly pleased with your giving. Matthew 25 tells us that when we feed the hungry, when we give the thirsty drink, when we clothe those who are naked, when we visit inmates in prison, we are ministering to Jesus Christ. So give whenever you see a need that you can meet or help meet. Never lose the attitude of giving. Oh, thank you, Miss Melba. I have to run now. I want to go back to the dorm and share these wonderful passages with the girls there. You are a blessing. I am glad to help, Jessica. Come back anytime.